Back here on the Cam Show, powered by Rogue Media Sports Network. Matt Barry of the Bruins Benders Podcast joining us live. Matt, can you hear me okay?
I can.
Oh,
Sorry to disappoint everyone that I'm this Matt Barry, but
yeah.
here I
Well,
am.
I was excited about that.
Yeah, sure.
This is, I was really teasing it as if like the people are probably thinking like, oh, it's probably going to be the What We Do in the Shadows guy. It's the day after Big Bruins news. I swear to God, if it's the fucking What We Do in the Shadows guy, and then in pops the Matt Barry they want.
Here we are.
Here we are on the Bruins from the Bruins Benders Podcast on the Cam Show. And Matt, how about it? We've got Thursday Night Football with the Patriots tonight, but the big story around Boston is the Boston Bruins and this Jeremy Swayman news. We like the ultimate blue ball of the offseason, man. They tell us the night before, everyone's on Twitter buzzing about the announcement coming tomorrow. Don Sweeney going to make the announcement at noon. It's going to be a contract, and we're starting to see figures. And then Don Sweeney comes on the stage and says, well, Jeremy's not going to be with us tomorrow. He is going to hold out is essentially what is happening until he gets a contract. So, Matt, I do want to get your initial thoughts. You've been covering this all offseason, all summer long. What were your thoughts when Don Sweeney came to the stage and it was not a Jeremy Swayman contract?
Honestly, I wasn't that surprised because I've been nervous about this for a while, and everyone I ever talked to or ever saw a post from us or ever watched or listened to our podcast would say it's all right, it's going to get done. Stop being dramatic and all this. Even media members who cover the team every single day would say that. But I just saw the signs of this kind of dragging out too long, and a lot of it stems from the animosity created during arbitration last year with Swayman and the Bruins. And I think Swayman still talks about it. So it really has created this real animosity for the situation, I guess, for the Bruins, how they handled it or the management of it. I don't know exactly who he's mad at. And also his agent, Louis Gross, is, he is historic. Infamous for doing this. And William Nylander had to call him like at the 11th hour before he was going to hold out himself and say, can we please just make a deal? So it's happened. Torrey Krug was a Boston Bruin until he wasn't, largely because Louis Gross wanted to get him the most money, which in hindsight was a great move by the Bruins to not do that because Krug may never play again. So, look, I wasn't all that surprised because it's trending. My co-host on the podcast, he's been saying it for forever that he thought this was going to go past training camp. And here we are. It's going. Don Sweeney threw out December 1st deadline. That's unnerving. That makes you real nervous
when you hear that.
Yeah, I mean, that's bad. That's past Thanksgiving. And an American Thanksgiving is that time frame in hockey where you have to kind of be in playoff position. So that's just past that. That's not good.
Yeah, we think of Thanksgiving, American Thanksgiving, not Columbus Day here, which is Canadian Thanksgiving, of like you got to kind of have your shit figured out by then.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? It's not unlike, Memorial Day in baseball of like you just need to know what your team is and what your goals are and all that. And you're right, that throws a big wrench into it. And we shouldn't be surprised, I guess. And I feel naive, but I was after hearing the reports late Tuesday night that this deal was done. And it's obviously not the case, although we didn't see the normal Bruins people reporting it. I think that's worth noting. We didn't see like Bruins beat writers reporting it or people who are used to breaking news for the team. But the writing was on the wall, whether these reports were accurate or not, that Don Sweeney didn't return a call for 3 weeks. He obviously made it very clear what he thought about that statement or just the fact that we kept hearing, September 1st, they'll be back in town. Everything will get done. Like teams aren't even throwing out offer sheets from what we're hearing. And yet it's not. And, as recently as 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 now, Jeremy Swayman was like, I know my worth. I'm going to make sure I'm setting the market. And it just feels like a mess right now. And I want to go back into that point on December 1st. because Sweeney says the deal is going to be done by the deadline, which is December 1st, which is 2 months basically into playing actual games for the Bruins. And right now, you just signed a new guy whose name I can't pronounce as a goalie for a PTO, but you've got Jonas Korpisalo and Brandon Bussey as your goaltending tandem. You've got arguably one of the best defense cores in the entire league. Can they get by with that for a couple of months, and maybe they've goalie Bob can figure out whatever Jonas Korpisalo's problem was with the Senators with this great decor that they have?
I think they can get by. Like, this is still a really good team. The problem could arise is that for years now, maybe 15 years, the Bruins have been bailed out by really great goaltending at times. So they've been really good because of their goaltending, probably first and foremost. So those games will probably be lesser, few and far between now, where the goalie stands on his head and they steal a 3-2 win. Like, those are the ones that they may not get now. So that's what I'll be looking for in the first 8 to 10 games. Are they getting, those wins where a goaltender makes 40 saves, they get the 2-1 win, and it's really largely because of the goaltending? If that happens, then they should be fine for a bit, I would say. But it's very dangerous to go into a season. This is only the second time, and the first time since 1980, that the Bruins have gone into a season with 2 goaltenders who haven't played a single game for them.
Sheesh.
So it was Jim Craig, man. It was Jim Craig and Rogie Vachon in 1980. Man. Okay, that team started 3-9-3. So that's not comforting either. Yeah. So I think right now, Korpisalo has had, some good moments in his career. He hasn't been great lately, of course. And Bussey is unproven. I mean, he's been a good college goalie. He's been a good AHL goalie, but, in how many games will he play? Will they go tandem while Korpisalo figures his stuff out? I'm not sure, but it does put them behind the 8 ball a little bit. And it's really telling to me that Don Sweeney doesn't usually take risks that will potentially cause them to miss the playoffs, because that's what ownership wants. They want the ticket gates in the playoffs. He'll keep his job if he does that. If he doesn't, then he won't keep his job. So to take this kind of risk with the goaltending tells me that he means business, and that maybe even the ownership has said, don't give in either.
Let's look at the Don Sweeney side of this, the Bruins side of this. Who do you think is more to blame for this being dragged out? From what you've heard and what you've seen, do you think this is more of a Swayman and his camp thing, or the Bruins kind of dicking around with Swayman?
Well, this is what we talked about last night on our podcast. Was I go back. I don't blame Sweeney for what's happening right now. The thing that I wish he did differently was when it went to arbitration and he had a chance to go 2 years on that deal, he should have gone 2 years. So if he goes 2 years and he's making $3.5 million last season and this season, and you trade Allmark, you have 1 season of Swayman at $3.5 million where he proves it. It's a built-in prove it deal. If you do well here, you might get 8 years, $9 million, $9.5 million after this season. Next off season, sure, we'll have more cap space. Maybe we can give you the big deal then. So in hindsight, Sweeney was trying to do Swayman a solid by doing just 1 year on that deal, getting him to an RFA status again. Then the team elected not to go to arbitration again, another solid. Then traded the other guy to show that Swayman was the guy. They did 3 things for him. Okay, so I'm not really blaming Sweeney. The only thing I think Sweeney will learn from this is to not do so much in the advantage of the player, so that the player kind of has you over a barrel. So right now, I'm seeing fans now who are really getting tired of Swayman, and not from the media comments he made, where he was talking about UMaine Business School and all this other stuff.
Baby, and
it just seemed really arrogant. Yeah, it just seemed like really arrogant and money grabbing and greedy. And he was also kind of whiny about the arbitration deal. Look, they didn't have any money to pay him then. Like, they couldn't give him a big deal then. So this is what was decided. And Sweeney had a plan, and Swayman just seems to not be willing to to deal with that plan and just wants to do his own thing. A lot of it's agent driven, but a lot of it's Swayman driven too, where he's not giving in. So it'll be interesting to see right now how far this goes. I tend to think it'll be done before opening night, but if it's not done before opening night and they get off to a decent start, it'll really start to be interesting to see if they take any calls on him.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, I know this is not an apples to apples comparison by any means, but when I think about the arbitration thing, I am thinking like, yeah, I know it's not a pretty sight for a player, but
No.
this is an organization that took Ray Bork to arbitration in
Sure.
the 90s, man.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it
Yeah.
happens, and,
Right.
and you're not Ray Bork. You
Right.
know what I mean?
Right.
So it's kind of just like a funny way to think about it.
Right.
But
Well, that's the thing. I mean, he hasn't played. He hasn't played 150 games. He hasn't had a full season as a goaltender. He's 25 years old. He's won one playoff series. You know, he hasn't won a Vezina. There's so many things against him from what he has done, which is important still in this conversation. What he will do, you can debate that to kingdom come. Sure, fine, but what he has done plays a factor. And he hasn't really been there yet. So I think 7.5 to 8 million is more than fair. And then Rich Keefe said yesterday on WEI that that the Bruins will not go over 8 million. I don't blame them. I wouldn't go over 8 million either. Like this, he hasn't earned that yet. He just hasn't. So, and the people who think just give him the money, just give him the money. Well, if they give him 9.5 million, then they are completely up against the cap, can't make a move unless they trade someone off the roster, and they really put themselves in a bind. And if he's not very good, or if he's just kind of above average, then you're paying a lot of money for a goaltender.
And to be fair to the Bruins too, like this summer was the one they had an eye towards all of last year when they were, scraping the bargain bin, and obviously Bergeron and Krejci retire, and there's a lot of money tied up in kind of dead space. And then they're like, this year we're going to get some guys off the books, probably one of the goaltenders, which they did, but they don't have as much of a cap hit because they bring in Korpisalo. And now the goalie is saying, well, I'd like all the rest of that, please.
Yeah.
Right. That is what the solution is here. And I don't think that any fan of any sport wants to hear, your bright young star saying, well, I'd really like to set the market.
Right. At that point, right. And guys like Brad Marchand and Patrice Bergeron and Zdeno Chara, who took discounted deals, hometown deals for the betterment of the organization, tried to build that culture. It got to be a little myth by it. Like they have to be. I mean, Marchand made some comments about not taking the contract stuff to the media and being respectful of the team, and the team being respectful of the player. It was kind of a dig at Swayman, I thought. So you have to feel that someone like a Marchand, who hasn't been probably paid as much as he could have been as one of the best left wings in the league the last 6-8 years, he probably feels a little bit like, dude, just get on the ice. Sign a deal that the team, feels is fair, and get your ass on the ice. Like that would be my thought if I was Marchand.
And because we're talking about a team that, like, I'm not under the illusion they're going to go to the Cup final this year, but they're not that far off from really competing for the Stanley Cup. Sure. As we saw, obviously 2 years ago, they had a buzzsaw of a team. And then last year you were like, man, we're close. You need a couple more pieces. You're not as good as Florida, but you're close there. And one of those big pieces is, having a franchise goalie, and one that has the potential that we think Swayman has. And that has to be frustrating for everyone in that room right now.
Sure. I mean, you have teams like Carolina and Florida who you can debate probably aren't as good as they've been. Tampa Bay is aging. There's other teams like Detroit and Buffalo who are up and coming, but not there yet. I mean, this could be a year where you win the division if you just stay healthy and have a good core. They have a good defensive core now. They're big and heavy. They have another centerman now, even though it's probably not. You can debate whether it's a number one or an 80, 90 point guy. Probably isn't that, but it's at least another really good player in the middle. So you have the components there to possibly win the division and be right there again. If you look in the Eastern Conference, I don't know if anybody really stands out as super great right now. So you could, based on the competition, be right there, and you could make a deadline deal and so forth. So that's why it's really sort of demoralizing when there was I felt like there was a lot of fever coming in. They got Lindholm, they got Sidorov, they made some moves. They showed that they cared and wanted to better the team. And it really was a pretty good vibe. Brad Marchand was going to be healthier. You had young guys like Lohrei and Poitras who really showed some promise. There was a lot of good vibes heading in. And I feel like this just pops the balloon a little.
It does. It does. And again, it's a team that's not that far away. And
No, it's not. It
gotta be
really isn't.
frustrating to see as a fan. And looking it back to Sweeney here, because now there's all kinds of discourse on social media on Don Sweeney's shortcomings. And let's be honest, I mean, he's kind of hit or miss in free agency. We're hoping these are hits this year, but I think back to the 2015 free agent cycle, and it feels like Bruins fans have become a lot more critical of the front office and the general manager in the moment, having gone through the Peter Chiarelli experience where it was so great for so long. And then you get towards the end and it's like, oh shit, this guy kind of fucked us here in terms of the cap and some of these third and fourth liners and multiple year deals. And now I think that leads to more criticism of Don Sweeney. I saw Felger defending him last night. You've had a contender for 10 years almost under Sweeney. And I'm just wondering, where do you sit on this? Do you think this is a black mark on Sweeney's tenure? And do we need to think of Sweeney's tenure as a failure?
I think it's unfair because the team has the best record in Sweeney's tenure in the entire National Hockey League. They had a record-breaking regular season. They went to a cup final. They have a tremendous record in the almost 10 years he's been there as general manager. He gets killed for 2015 draft, which he literally did a month or two after he was hired.
Yeah.
But he gets killed for it, and rightfully so. But 9 years later, I think we can move on from it. All the players have moved on from it. So I think it's time now to kind of take him at a bigger scope and see that he's done a really good job. He's had some great trades, Taylor Hall, Charlie Coyle. I mean, he's had some fantastic trades in there that have helped the team, make some cup runs, or at least have a fighting chance for it. I'm not a huge Don Sweeney guy. I mean, there's some things that irritate me about him, but as a whole, I think, look, we live in our Bruins bubble where we don't pay attention to the other teams on a larger scope. We just don't. So if you took all the other GMs in the league, first of all, not many are still there 10 years later, but the ones that are, you could find a ton of bad drafts, a ton of bad trades, a ton of bad signings. He did a great job with getting real superstars to sign team-friendly deals. He's created a really good culture there. You're right. Chiarelli had no trade clauses everywhere. He had bad contracts. It was a dumpster fire, and he was able to take them from being at the bottom in 2015-16 to really being, 15-16 to being right there in 19. And here's another point that he made yesterday, which is a little bit of his own horn tooting, but hey, I'll give it to him, is that if you look at teams who've lost their core, like the Bruins had, Chara, Rask, Bergeron, Krejci. If you looked at teams who lose their core, almost every single one hits almost rock bottom, like Detroit and Chicago. And all these teams, LA, all these teams hit rock bottom before they come back up. The Bruins never did. They may have missed a playoff, 1 year or so, but they haven't, and they've been right there, and they continue to be right there. So that's another good point. But look, no one criticizes their team more than Bruins fans do. No one loves to hate their own team like the Bruins fans do. No one holds on to their old narratives like Bruins fans do. It's part of why we love doing the podcast, to be honest.
Yes.
But it's part of what keeps the engagement going. But if you looked at it rationally, then Sweeney's been one of the better executives in the league the last 9-10 years.
Absolutely. He's gone all in when they needed to go all in. Had some great teams. 19 should have won the cup, to be honest with you. That was a good enough team to win the Stanley Cup. But yeah, and you don't need to look far either. I mean, look at Toronto. Okay, they've drafted well, but they can't keep their superstars in for below market value. Or you look at Montreal. They have not drafted very well the last 10 years. So, you don't need to look far. And Matt Barry of the Bruins Benders podcast, one more question before I get you out of here. I put an impassioned cry for help out the other day because our man Phil the Thrill Kessel is 8 points away from 1,000 career points. He is looking to play in the NHL this year. Any shot the Bruins throw a PTO and bring Phil back home where he was drafted.
Well, I'll tell you what, with their question marks about the second line right wing, I really thought it might be possible. But then they took Tyler Johnson, who's sort of in the similar situation as Kessel is, instead of Kessel. You know what? I think Phil has still got some, he's one of the real mysteries in the entire history of professional sports. He eats hot dogs and I don't think he even works out, and he just goes and scores
Coke
goals.
instead of water.
Drinks Coke, and yeah, he just
battled cancer, by the way.
If you look at his photos, he just looks like a guy that you're bumping at the grocery store, but he scores goals left and right. Still at this age,
plays all the time.
He does. Just somebody's going to give him a go at some point. Someone will get injured. He'll come in for a tryout. He'll stick, and then I hope that he can get to where he needs to go, because he's been a great offensive player for a long, long time, and he's been on some really good teams too, and performed in the playoffs. Like he's been a really good player in this generation.
And now 3 Stanley Cups, and you cannot look at a picture like that, like the memed pictures over the years, and say, yeah, this guy's got the modern NHL record for consecutive games.
Yeah, for consecutive games. I mean, that throws all the nutrition, like him and John Daly throw all the medical advice out the window. Man. Like, it's just crazy.
Like, they laugh at Brady. They absolutely laugh.
Oh, my God, they do. Like, what are you doing that for? Yeah.
Matt Barry of the Bruins Benders Podcast, my favorite Bruins podcast, the only one I really listened to like every episode. So where can people find it, and what do you guys have coming up? When's the next release?
We're on YouTube or through the Inside the Rink YouTube channel. Go ahead and subscribe to that. We're also on Apple, Spotify, all the podcast platforms. We're weekly, every Wednesday night, live on YouTube, usually right around 8 p.m. And we'll do post games pretty much all year long. We did it in the playoffs. The fans really liked it, so we're going to do regular season post games too. So we're on X at Bruins Benders, so check us out. And always appreciate being on, Cam, and hope to do it again soon.
Love having you on, Matt. I think you talk Bruins better than just about anyone out there. I really appreciate that. Thank you to Matt Barry. We're going to have Pete Souza, who does not talk about the Bruins, on the Cam Show next. We're going to talk about Aaron Hernandez, and he's finally caught up in those first 2 episodes. We've got that coming up on the Cam Show, powered by Rogue Media Sports Network.
We are Rogue Media Sports.